Well, thanks for coming to have a discussion today about the Prospering for the Energy Revolution projects, and particularly the engagement with local stakeholders and local communities. So there's three of you here from three great projects that have been working over the past couple of years in the smart local energy space. And we're going to start off, I'm going to offer you a chance to just say a little bit about the project that you are involved in and who you are and what your role in it is. So let's start with you, Jamie. You've been working on a project in Northern Ireland. Would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your project?
My name is Jamie Ray. I was the project manager for Project Girona. Project Girona was a SLES project that was based in and around Coleraine in Northern Ireland. The project was to install a PV solar panel system plus battery plus smart management over the top of that, to demonstrate the benefits to the participants, the project participants, and also on the local electricity infrastructure.
Great, and the area where your project was based, there was, am I right, there was quite a high level of kind of fuel poverty in the area?
Yeah, it's one of the sort of hardest hit areas in Northern Ireland for that. So it was great that we could deploy this kit and equipment for free to each participant, so that they could enjoy the benefits of generating their electricity, storing it in a battery, and then having it intelligently managed for them. But the key point to it was that they could get their hands on their own data. They could say on a minute-by-minute basis what was happening to their electricity in their home, business, community centre or farm.
Great. Okay, thanks very much. So moving on to you, Louise, and your project based in Rugeley in the Midlands.
Yeah. So I'm Louise Alter. I work for Equans, and I was leading the Zero Carbon Rugeley project. And we were looking to develop a smart local energy system on the back of a regeneration project. So in Rugeley there used to be a huge coal power station, which was brought down in closed in 2016. And on the back of that, there's a new development that is kind of being developed at the moment that is just trying to beat net zero, or as close as possible to net zero. And the idea was to take the town around it with it that was kind of being robbed of its identity and of its kind of means of its economy, really, and actually using that as a conductor to try something new and to kind of stay at the front of the energy sector while at the same time kind of really embracing the net zero transition.
That must have been interesting, working with a community whose heritage was so much kind of embedded in the energy system for decades or even longer, I guess.
Yeah, so the community has been really involved from kind of the start of the Industrial Revolution, with both the coal power station, but there's also some coal mining and some kind of early engagement on the energy revolution and kind of participating in that growth around Birmingham. So that was, the community engagement was kind of diverse from that.
Grand. It'll be interesting, we'll come back to that as later in the discussion, but it'd be interesting thinking about how that group feels about moving away from carbon to a low carbon economy. But Graham, on to you. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and the project you were involved in Manchester.
Hi, I'm Graham Oakes. I'm an independent consultant, but I was a partner in the Greater Manchester Local Energy Market, the GMLEM. What we were doing was exploring, could you create and how would you create a market where people could buy and sell energy with a local attribute to it. So I could buy energy from my next door neighbour or from somebody in the next borough or something like that. And how would such a market be structured? How could you make it work?
So I think maybe starting with your project a little bit then. That's an idea that's been around for quite a while, the idea of local energy markets or local electricity markets. And I'm interested in how you engage with the local community and citizens and consumers to make sure that this was something that would work for the people and the businesses of Manchester.
And that's a fundamental question in a sense, because I think a lot of the value of the market is actually expanding beyond just this view of what's the cheapest possible energy, because energy is about more than just cheap energy. It's about air quality, it's about net zero, it's about local employment. There's a whole lot of other values that when you start to talk to people, you can start to understand what's that wider value pool. And within the project, we engaged in a variety of different ways. It was quite a large project in itself. There were 12 or 13 partners. And partners, like energy suppliers like OVO, asked, could we set up, in their case, a heat pump tariff, so they would provide the electricity to run your heat pump on a separate bill? And would that be interesting if you could provide the energy for your heat pump from local PV or from local hydro or something like that? And so that's a product perspective. Could a supplier create a local energy product using the market to source its energy? But we also had Carbon Co-op talking more at a community level. Well, what are the community values? And then at the wider project level, the really interesting thing we did is we ran a citizens jury. And so we pulled in a dozen semi-random people. We couldn't be like a proper jury and just tell 12 people you must turn up. We had to recruit people who had time to come and spend a couple of days, sit down with a group of experts to ask their questions about the energy system, about how it works. And what we were asking these people was, how should a local market be governed? Because what does local mean? Is local my street, my town, Greater Manchester, my county? What is local? And how do I define what is a local energy supplier? How do I define what is a community energy supplier? And so we asked them, how should this be governed? What would be acceptable to you as a governance structure around this? Could it be a company? If it's a company, would it have to be a UK-based company? Would it have to be a locally owned company? Would it be a co-op? And questions like that. And it was really interesting, very strong view that they want to see local governance. That they wouldn't see this as something that could be run by a multinational company.
So it would have to be local people, local organisations involved in this?
And so various ways you could do that, and I think there's a bit of a trade-off between what's the perfect and what's practical, because you've got to find investors to make this work, and they want to have a share in this. But there's a role definitely for some local institution, local organisation to run this with various incoming investment, a role for the local authority as a democratically elected body to be involved in running this, and probably some sort of golden share with key decision making that goes to the democratically accountable local authority, and very much a role for a local authority, not for Ofgem.
Yeah.
Canary Wharf is a long way from Manchester.
And what is it that the jury, it's interesting that you brought these people together and gave them an opportunity to sort of develop their opinions and thoughts on this. What was their view on the important difference of giving that golden share to somebody like a local authority as opposed to leaving it with the regulator or somebody else?
It was about really being able to hands-on ask questions of what's going on in our market. People have heard of greenwashing, about clean energy. Will there be local washing if you had a local energy market? How can they drill into that and find out what's really going on? And so certainly they want transparency, they want reporting, they want the ability to ask questions. And again, that's really hard to do if you can't actually sit together in a room with the people and see the whites of their eyes as you ask the questions. And I think that's what they wanted.
And so moving on to you, Louise, that kind of phrase of Graham's there, sort of seeing the whites of people's eyes in the local community, seems really important. How did you go about that in Zero Carbon Rugeley? What were the sorts of activities that you did to try to really make sure the project was engaging with the people in your town?
Yeah, so I think our approach was kind of similar in the sense that we tried to really engage with the community around the technologies and the solutions. So what we kind of did was kind of an approach where we tried to explain and really communicate the solution with the people in the community so that they could kind of pick that up and understand what actually works with them and what doesn't work for them, because actually every community is different and the needs of every community is really different. So we did quite a lot of kind of going to them and presenting the solution, and then went back to the kind of more technology-oriented people of the consortium and said, actually, that doesn't really work for us. You know, that the community doesn't respond well to that, that doesn't fit with their history and with kind of their day-to-day life, which is obviously very different where they were than where we were. We were kind of spread across the country with also, I think we were 11 organizations at the beginning. So it's really, you know, about understanding that local context. And so we spent a lot of time trying to understand that local context at the beginning of the project, where we really went into kind of some cultural animation workshops and some kind of deep learning workshops where we really spent time with people around the subject of energy, but not so specific around the kind of asking them questions in a more kind of traditional way of engaging with the public, but really about engaging in a way that is a bit broader and enables them to really share their opinion without them feeling under the spotlight in that sense.
I guess both of you are sort of engaging with people who are not energy system experts, but they're energy system users, and they are the reason why we have an energy system. So how do you kind of manage that balance between the need for sort of technical understanding versus the need for, you know, responding to what the community wants, regardless of the technicalities? Do you want to go for that, Louise?
So I think the way we approached it was a lot about creating what we called a SLES ready community. So it was about really providing those learnings and that carbon literacy. So as much as the community we were in has I think probably a better understanding than a lot of communities of energy and kind of what a kilowatt hour is and all of that, but then relating that back to actually a technology that they're, you know, not familiar with, was kind of quite a lot of work, and for them to understand really the relationship with carbon and the climate change behind that. So that whole kind of chain reaction, as much as, you know, some technical details were much better understood than anywhere else, the kind of broader picture and how everything of that fits together was really important for us. And so it was really about finding that balance, as you said, between, you know, providing enough literacy on carbon and on energy so that people can make decisions, while at the same time creating the trust that the decision that the more technical people were making are kind of the right decisions, and that those can kind of be trusted to a certain extent to be taken on board by the community.
And did you find that the community was positive about moving on from a carbon-based, coal-based energy system to one that is moving towards zero carbon?
So I think that the thing to remember about Rugeley is really that because it has this history of coal and mining and the power station, they're really attached to that as a legacy. So it's not just kind of energy in general, it's really the coal power station is kind of their identity. So when the towers were actually brought down, that was a big moment for the community, because they suddenly realized, well, what everything that has been representing us doesn't exist anymore. And so how do we move on past that? And it was really about them taking ownership of that kind of, you know, that moment in time where they could kind of choose their future and choose the way they wanted to move on from that.
And the project gave them a bit of an opportunity to engage
Hopefully.
in that process.
Hopefully.
Really, really good. I'm going to move on to Jamie and talk a little bit about your engagement with your local community. Again, it's presumably a community of people who are sort of struggling at times with use of energy, given the costs and things at the moment. How did you find them as a community in terms of responding to the opportunities that Girona provided?
If I start off by where we got it wrong, we set our assumption of base level knowledge a bit too high for the Girona project area. And that's what happens whenever you have a bunch of experts sitting in a room who know what they're talking about and, you know, coming up with a plan. So whenever our initial engagement was poor to start off with, you know, we were going to give for free solar panels on the roof, an 11 kilowatt hour battery, all intelligently managed for them. To me and to the rest of the project team, why wouldn't you? But there was a high degree of suspicion and skepticism about what we were doing and why we were doing it. So we had to go away very quickly and think about our approach again. And whenever we looked at this and thought, right, okay, we need to be a bit more open about what we're doing, and we need to help people understand the technology and educate them along that line. Things really started to move very, very quickly. We got 2 community centres involved. One of the key people for us was a local electrician who got the technical side, understood what he was going to get. As soon as it went into his house, people could see the solar panels on the roof. They knew it wasn't going to be some sort of scam or something along those lines. And then fast forward towards the end of the project, where we had a social housing tenant. We were bringing the social housing landlord up to visit the project, showing them around, and one of the social housing landlord people asked the tenant, "What does this mean to you?" And the tenant reached into her pocket, pulled out her smartphone, brought her app up and said, "That's what I'm generating, that's what I'm saving, I like this." And what we have done is taken that person from probably very little background knowledge into what this technology can do, to enabling her to have this technology, this data, this information in her back pocket for that household to make informed decisions about when they put the washing machine on, when they put the dishwasher on, or when they put the tumble dryer on, all those things that that household did not have before. And that's making a dramatic difference to their lives. And then we layer in on top of that where we were able to provide flex services. So they're saving pounds, shillings and pence, and they're saving CO2 because they're generating, storing, and in some cases exporting renewable electricity. But then the project took part in the NIE Networks Project Flex, which was to provide network services to the grid. And we had 28 batteries within the, or households within the project that were enabled to do this. And basically, on command, we would export electricity back onto the network to provide network services, and each household was remunerated for that for that service. So not only is we saving, but that household was earning as well, which is brilliant.
Have you got? Do you know kind of roughly what was the scale of the savings for some of these households?
Oh yeah, so across the Girona cluster, it was 55%. Our top saver was 78.9% on their electricity bills.
So that means between the year before they had it to the year after they had it, it was 78% cheaper. That's an incredible.
That was our top performer. And one of the interesting things we found out was there was another household that was in around about 34%, and we couldn't figure out why. We looked at the household, we looked at the installation, we thought, something not working here, and everything seemed to be right. And then reviewing the notes, the owner of that house had an electric vehicle. So he was charging his car off it. And that was something, that household was probably saving in around about the 50 to 55%, but they're also charging their car off the battery and the generated electricity. So they're getting their savings in terms of not paying for petrol or diesel. So there's still a benefit there.
So that point, the point you made at the start about people potentially being suspicious when new ideas come up, that's an interesting one, and it's obviously something that needs to be overcome to make sure that SLES projects can really deliver. Is that something that your citizens jury helps deal with? Did you find that kind of attitude among people in Manchester, and is it something that you had to engage with?
I think people are in different places, and I think one of the things that came across quite strongly from the citizens jury and from the engagement is the energy system tends to talk about the customer like everyone's the same. There's one customer and everyone's like that. And to be honest, they think it's the meter, it's not the person anyhow. But people are different, and one of the key findings was that there's a segment of the market that really cares about local. They care about local jobs, they care about the local community, and they're prepared to pay a bit extra for energy because they value the locality of it. And that's a really important group because That helps give you some early revenue, that helps you create the market and grow it. And then once it gets to a certain scale, then it starts to tap into economies of scale, and you can start to actually reduce costs for the people, the later adopters who really do need to go for the cheapest possible energy. And so those early adopters help you create the market. They address, like the electrician, someone who understands the system. People can say, they can see something that's working, they see they haven't been scammed, and they can sign up. And so again, you need to find those early adopters and those seed points to start the market, and then you can grow out from there.
And the point is, we talked about the savings in Girona, which are huge, but did the users of the system also value the carbon savings? Was that something that you were getting back from the users of the system, that it was it more than just the price and the cost?
It's a really interesting question. For those households that had families and and children that were, say, from about 10 to 18 still living at the home, they really got the carbon bit. And there's a bit in our app that will show you how much carbon you have saved today, and that was the bit that the children wanted to see. Whereas the adults are more thinking about how much money have I saved, along that. The younger generations were more engaged on that side, because they see climate change as that's their future, and it's going to affect their future. It's going to affect all our future, of course, but it's loud and clear to the younger generations, and that's where we saw more engagement on that side rather than the financial side. Now, saying that, the younger generations weren't paying for electricity, the mortgage, or the rent or whatever it was. It's different priorities, but we did have that side to the project.
That's interesting, and I see sort of the point that there's different values for different consumers, which is what you were sort of saying at the start. It's not just something that's the same for everyone. Let's think about what's coming next. So I think a really important thing for PIFA, for the Prospering for the Energy Revolution programme, is that it's had all these experiences across all these projects, and it's really good to know effectively what advice you would give to the next generation of projects and what is coming next. So maybe if I start with you, Louise, what would you like to see happen next? And are there particular things happening off the back of Zero Carbon Rugeley that sort of use these principles that we've been talking about?
Yeah, so I think for Zero Carbon Rugeley, we've already used the methodology that we've developed to create the smart local energy system, kind of that first technical version. We've already used that methodology somewhere else. So we've replicated that, and now it's about the things that didn't work so well in the community engagement. We want to kind of see how we can actually integrate them, because interestingly enough, we found that it was actually easier for us to explain the technicalities to the community than what the community was feeling back to the technical people, because that was actually something that they just weren't really used to, taking that feedback, whereas the community is used to kind of, saying, yes, I like that, no, I don't like that. Whereas in the technical world, that's just not really something that people tend to do. So I think we want to make sure that that kind of works better, but also I think we worked with Gill University, and Gill University did all of the most of the engagement for us. And what we would really like to see is actually something that we could really hand over to the local authorities or to the kind of community body in charge that will stay beyond the project, so that that piece of engagement and that piece of learning can really be taken on board. And so kind of that train the trainer methodology, which we've tried to apply. So we're now kind of going through that. But I think we realized relatively late that that was something that we should have done earlier on.
But you still see it? Is it still happening in Rugeley? Have you got groups?
Yeah, so there's a group that's been created off the back of Zero Carbon Rugeley, which is run completely by the locals. There are, I think, 6 different people that are kind of leading up that group. It's called Eco Rugeley, and they're the ones who are going to take forward some of the plans and keep that conversation going with the local authority. But having that engagement at a local authority with a body that kind of already has agency and resources is something that I think is really important, that we maybe struggled a bit to do and should have maybe thought about earlier in that way. So that would be kind of one of my advices for the other groups.
Thank you. And in GM-LEM, in the Greater Manchester project, I mean, looking through your project, there's obviously, great opportunities to expand the idea of the market, put it into practice. What are you hoping happens next?
So the next step, in a sense, is to start making it happen. And it's not just the market, the market is one of the things that helps trigger the wider change within Manchester. Manchester has a 2038 net zero target, and we did within the project a lot of local area energy plans, and they've identified, I forget the exact number, but it's tens of billions of pounds of investment that needs to be made in Manchester to deploy the heat pumps, the EV charging, the hydrogen where there's going to be hydrogen, whatever. There's a huge amount that we need to do in the next 15 years till Manchester wants to be net zero. The market is part of that, and the next stage is starting to pull together the investors and the equipment providers, people like that, to start to go on this investment program, and the combined authorities building the business case for the first couple of £1 billion worth of investment to make that happen.
And who needs to lead on this? Is this a local authority job to lead on this?
In a sense, everybody needs to lead on it. We all need to play our part, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen. The local authority has a key coordination role, and it pulls together consortia. It's got, certainly the local authorities, they've got a lot of their own buildings that they can start to put PV on the roof of. They've got their own land that they can put PV onto. They can start to move to clean energy supply for their own buildings. And so that helps seed the market, and that's an important anchor to create the market from. But they need to work with the investment community, they need to work with the equipment manufacturers, and so they can use that anchor role, but also that convening role to pull together a variety of people. And again, it goes back to communities need to also be part of those groups, and they need to be doing their own thing, need to be identifying at a local level. Where I'm at, there's a we scope to do local hydro.
Yes.
Other communities don't have that option, but identifying what works in our community, what are the resources that we can see, that we can do, and it will be cheaper if we can generate for ourselves. It will reduce our dependence on international gas supplies. It will be cleaner, and that's what local can do, can find a way to do that works in their area.
That works and uses the resources and the opportunities in your part of the world.
Yeah.
Thanks. Finally, Girona. So what's next for Girona? You've obviously made a huge difference to the people's lives in the area of Coleraine that you've worked in. What's going to happen next, do you think, for your project?
So the project, we're building on the data that we've got, and we've built up some fantastic profiles from the Girona participants. In the background of the hardware deployment in Girona, we built our Paris energy management software, which is now a core product for our company, the electric storage company. And what we are seeking to do is to push that software out to individuals who want to have it in their own homes, to companies, be large and small, to the farming community. In Northern Ireland, there's a target for 80% reduction in CO2 by 2030. That's a tough target for farmers to meet, and one of the key things that we can do is help them reduce that. Then with our Paris software, one of the nice things about that is not only can you save, but you can earn. As I said, we can provide network services back onto the local network, but also we're developing it now to trade electricity. And that can be, if you have a large company that has multi-sites, trading it from site to site or on the day-ahead market as well. What we want to do is revolutionise the way the electricity markets sector is at the minute. Currently it's very opaque, and the way we see it in Northern Ireland hasn't changed since the 1950s. You get what you're given. We want to put that power back in the individual's pocket, or the company's pocket, or the farmer's pocket, so that they can make decisions about how they generate their electricity, how they consume it, and what they want to do with it in terms of export it, sell it, keep it for a rainy day, or whatever. And the more that happens, the faster, in our opinion, the electricity system in the UK and Europe globally will change for the better, and we'll move away from this dependency on large scale power generation and more into individual and smaller scale generation, storage and intelligent management. The crux of that is data, and that's what we can give our customers.
Thank you, that's really interesting. So we started from how you engage with local communities and institutions, and we finished with how you give agency back to those local people and local businesses. So I think we'll finish there. Thanks Jamie, Louise and Graham. That was a really interesting discussion.